Welcome to part 4 of my series on smarter defences, and this time we're going away from air defences and are instead going to look at self-preservation by normal ground units. And whilst this video was inspired by the overuse of centrifuge weapons, it's also applicable to other types of weapon. Now, lots of people love the SFW and it is very cool, but it's massively over-effective against static targets. Whilst against moving units, there is a common tactic of firing a Maverick at one vehicle to stop the column moving, and then dropping SFWs on the rest as they hide, and this is a little bit gamey. In fact, it's very, very gamey. So, it's time to try and even things up a little bit. And in this video, I want to see how we can limit the effectiveness against static targets. And I'm going to follow with another video on how we can limit the Maverick and then bomb tactic. So let's start with me doing an attack, which isn't going to end very well. Then we'll go on to the mission editor and finally refly the same attack, which will hopefully be somewhat better. Okay, we're on board, and as you can see on Lightning Pod, we've got about a dozen T90 tanks ripe for the picking by my SFWs. Looking around, there seems to be 3 trucks, so I can probably follow up and pick those off with my guns afterwards, as there are no SAM threats around. We're now about 8 miles out and we've climbed to about 8,000 feet. But I'm not aligned with the column, so I'm going to carry on looping round to the left so we can kill them all in a single run. Okay, we're pretty much aligned now, so let's turn on target and begin our final attack run. "30 seconds. 20. 10 seconds. And release. I rather suspect by now you're gonna guess what's about to happen. As you can see, the vehicles are dispersing. Those flashes are the canisters opening up, but I don't think these drivers need to panic all that much. They could have stayed and had a Kit Kat. And predictably, we've hit nothing. Well, I've still got my gun, so I'm going to turn back in and see if I can get some kills with that. And now I've been hit by a missile. So that's no kills and heavy damage. That's what you get for being a shockingly bad pilot. Let's now take a look at how this was set up, and if you watch one of my earlier videos you might assume that I've used the same script using the is target detecting function. But unfortunately it's not really suitable here, as its limit for visual detection is only 3 miles, even with optics, which is a little bit odd as you can hear aircraft from almost 3 miles, let alone see them. So instead, what I've done is to create a series of zones. The first is at 10 miles, then 7, and finally 4 miles. And I've also set altitude limits for low, medium, and high altitudes for the inner zones, such that the closer you get, then the lower or higher you need to be to avoid detection. Then I've created a random condition which depends on how likely you are to be spotted in that area. Obviously, the further from the target you are, the less likely to be spotted. But you're also less likely to be spotted when flying at treetop height or very high. But once you are spotted, a flag is activated and then there is another random delay. And this simulates how quickly the ground units are to react. So theoretically, you might get spotted quickly, but they are slow to react, or you might get spotted late and they are quick to react. These variables are up to the mission editors to define, and it's a little bit like the alert status. Frontline troops are likely to be alert and on guard, whilst rear echelon units aren't. Additionally, I've split the 12 tanks into 4 groups of 3. Otherwise, once they are alerted, it takes them ages to line up in formation before driving off. Each of the groups has a default action to hold position and also a triggered action to go to a waypoint. And finally, we have these 3 trucks, and I'll come to them later on. Okay, we'll now go through the triggers in a little bit more detail. Okay, the first trigger condition is when an aircraft enters the 10-mile zone between 2,000 and 6,000 feet. But even then, there's only a very small chance of detection, and we have 4 random triggers, each set at 1%. So that's 4 times 100, or 0.25% chance in any given second. So if you loiter around there for quite a few minutes, you will eventually get detected. Once detected, a flag is triggered, and we get a message appearing on screen as well. The conditions for trigger 2 is that the aircraft needs to be within 7 miles, above 300 feet, below 700 feet, and there is a 1 in 300 chance of being spotted in any given second. And again, we're using the same flag, which is flag 90. Then we have medium altitude between 700 and 2,000 feet with a 1 in 100 chance. And high altitude between 2,000 and 9,000 feet, back to a 1 in 300 chance. Then as we get to close range within 4 miles, the lower zone is between 100 and 400 feet, but now it jumps up to a 1 in 25 chance. Next up is where you definitely don't want to be. That's within 4 miles between 400 and 6,000 feet, as there is only 1 in 4 chance. And finally, inside of 4 miles, if you're up higher, between 6,000 and 12,000 feet, it drops off a little bit, so there's a 1 in 10 chance. Now, don't get too hung up on the numbers that I've used. There's no real science behind them, and I'm not suggesting that you use the same figures or that they're perfect. They're not. It's up to you to define what works for your mission. So, for example, a guy with an AK-47 isn't going to spot you at 10 miles, but a commander with thermal imaging certainly could. This next trigger I just used in the testing, just to give me a message that I'd been detected. The last but one trigger is the main trigger to disperse the vehicles. What we're trying to simulate is the delay between us being detected and the vehicles actually moving off. I've set this to a minimum of 30 seconds with a random element, so the average here would be around 40 seconds. We can alter this, of course, and we can also set different times for each group if we wish to. Once triggered, they are then set to move to a specific waypoint. And finally, let's look at that missile that appeared out of nowhere. So, to dissuade pilots from simply loitering around doing gun run after gun run, I've simulated a guy with a man pad in one of the trucks. So after a random amount of time, he gets out, grabs his man pad and opens fire. In reality, it's just an igloo that's deactivated at mission start, and after a random amount of time post-detection, he'll get out and start trying to shoot you down, provided you've not already destroyed the truck that he was in. So let's now refly the mission and see if we can use our SFW successfully this time. We're back on board running the same mission and we're just about to cross the coastline. This time though, we're at low level. In fact, we are far too low to drop our weapons. But they're all primed and ready to go and our mark point is set.
Pull up.
We'll try and skirt over these trees and then dip back down again. At about 4 miles, I want to start climbing up to at least my minimum release altitude. But if it was heavy AAA or known man pads, you might want to continue climbing. Okay, we'll level out now. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. And release. Still no reaction.
Pull up.
There's confirmation that we've been finally detected as a hostile, but it's far too late. And there's 6 SFWs doing the worst. So there you have it. You can still use SFWs, but hopefully mission editors can use this to try and stop pilots lazily flying around dropping ordnance at their leisure, if that's what they want to achieve, of course. So that wraps it up for this video. If you found it useful, please do hit like and subscribe.